Why would a lonely cowboy claim a rejected stranger as his wife in front of an entire frontier town? The trunk snagged hard on a warped depot nail. Wood scraped. Eleanor pulled again as the Arizona heat burned through her gloves. Boots stood motionless around her. Then another pair crossed the boards. A cowboy lifted her trunk, held out his hand and said, "You're my wife." But why would Nathan Carter risk everything for a woman he had never met? Tell me in the comments, would you take his hand? The train left Eleanor Brooks standing in a cloud of dust. For several seconds after the last passenger car disappeared beyond the bend, she could still feel the rails trembling beneath the soles of her boots. Then even that stopped. Red Creek settled back into the heat. It was late afternoon, but the Arizona sun showed no mercy. Heat shimmered above the tracks. A tired horse stood beneath the depot awning, with one hind leg resting. Somewhere across the road, a loose piece of tin knocked softly against the side of a building. Eleanor remained beside her trunk. 4 days from Philadelphia. 4 days of coal smoke, hard seats, station coffee, and sleeping with one hand wrapped around the handle of her traveling case. 4 days imagining the man who would be waiting here. Charles Whitmore Hargrove. Instead, an aging station master named Harold came through the depot door holding an envelope. "Miss Brooks?" Eleanor turned. "Yes." Harold looked past her toward the empty tracks before handing it over. "Mr. Hargrove asked me to give you this." The envelope had already told her something was wrong. A man waiting to marry a woman did not send a station master to greet her. Eleanor broke the seal. The letter was brief. Hargrove wrote that further consideration of their correspondence had convinced him they were poorly suited. Her education, her opinions, and what he called her excessive independence were not qualities he desired in a frontier wife. He required someone practical, someone obedient, someone better suited to the life he intended to lead. He regretted the inconvenience. Eleanor read the letter once, only once. Then she folded it along its original crease and placed it inside her oilcloth document case. Harold cleared his throat. "There's another train tomorrow." She looked at him. "What time?" 11:20 if she's running proper." "Thank you." He seemed relieved that she had not cried. That almost made it worse. Eleanor had $14 in her purse. She knew because she had counted it that morning. Her trunk weighed nearly 60 pounds. Inside were 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, her father's old fountain pen, several books, letters, certificates, and everything else she had believed worth carrying into a new life. She bent and took hold of the leather handle. The trunk moved 6 inches, then stopped. One of the metal corners had caught beneath a warped platform board where an old nail protruded. Eleanor pulled again. Nothing. There were people nearby. A ranch hand leaning against a post. 2 women waiting beside parcels. A man loading sacks into a wagon. Harold stood in the depot doorway. Nobody moved. Eleanor set down her traveling case and took the trunk with both hands. She pulled harder. The leather handle creaked. Still nothing. She became aware of another man standing near the hitching rail. Tall, narrow-faced. Gray hat, gray horse behind him. He wasn't looking at her trunk. He was looking at her. Clem Draper. She did not know his name yet, but she knew the expression. Someone had expected this moment. Eleanor straightened. Dust clung to the hem of her blue traveling dress. She bent once more. Then boots sounded against the boards. Slow, heavy, unhurried. A man's hand reached past hers and closed around the side handle of the trunk. "Careful," Eleanor said. "It's heavier than it looks." "So am I." She looked up. The stranger was perhaps 35, though the sun had put older lines around his eyes. His shirt had been washed enough times to lose its original color. Dust covered his boots nearly to the ankles. There was nothing polished about him. He tested the weight, then lifted the trunk free. The warped nail squealed beneath the metal corner. The stranger swung the trunk onto his shoulder. That was all. No speech. No smile meant to collect gratitude. He simply carried it. Clem Draper pushed away from the hitching rail. Carter. The stranger stopped. So that was his name. Draper nodded toward Eleanor. That woman came west on Mr. Hargrove's ticket. Nathan Carter shifted the trunk slightly against his shoulder. That's so. Hargrove isn't taking her. Nathan looked at Eleanor. Not at Draper. At her. For the first time since stepping from the train, Eleanor felt that someone was waiting to hear what she might say. Nathan extended his free hand. She'll be staying. A few faces turned. Draper's mouth tightened. Nathan's hand remained where it was. Then he said, plainly enough for the platform to hear, "My wife won't be needing tomorrow's train." The depot went silent. Eleanor stared at him. She could have slapped his hand away. Part of her wanted to. Instead, she looked at Draper, then at Harold, then at all the people who had watched her fight a 60-pound trunk without moving so much as one boot. Finally, she placed her hand in Nathan Carter's. His fingers closed carefully around hers, not tightly, just enough. Nathan led her toward his wagon. He did not release her hand until she was safely off the platform. 20 minutes later, Red Creek had disappeared behind them. Eleanor waited until the last rooftop was gone. Then she said, "Stop the wagon." Nathan pulled the reins. The horses slowed beneath a stand of mesquite. Eleanor turned toward him. "Am I your wife, Mr. Carter?" "No." "Did I agree to become your wife?" "No." "Then perhaps you'd explain why half of Red Creek now believes otherwise." Nathan rested his forearms against his knees. For a moment, he watched the horses breathe. "Hargrove owns land east of mine. Draper works for him. Red Creek likes Hargrove, because Hargrove spends money in Red Creek." "That does not answer my question." "No." He glanced at her. "It explains why I didn't want Draper knowing you were alone, nearly broke, and waiting overnight for a train." Eleanor's expression changed only slightly. Nathan had noticed the worn clasp on her purse. Or perhaps Hargrove had told people more than she realized. Nathan continued, "I own Silver Creek Ranch. I need somebody who can keep accounts, manage a house, and make sense of 3 years of papers I've been pretending don't exist. And marriage? Wasn't part of the offer. What is? Your own room, wages, meals, privacy. Tomorrow morning, if you want the depot, I'll bring you back myself." Eleanor watched him. "And tonight? You'll be Miss Brooks at Silver Creek." She looked toward the road ahead. "Then I have conditions." Nathan almost smiled. "Huh. I suspected you might. My room is mine. Yes. You knock. Yes. You don't tell your men I'm your wife. Agreed. And if I'm expected to keep your accounts, you show me all of them." That erased the hint of amusement from his face. "All? Debts too." Nathan looked away. The wind moved through the mesquite. Finally, he picked up the reins, especially those. They traveled west. The country opened into long stretches of pale grass and red earth. Mountains stood blue-gray in the distance. Eleanor watched cattle trails, dry washes, fence lines, and the occasional cottonwood marking hidden water. After another mile, she asked, "How bad?" Nathan knew what she meant. "Bad enough." "Bank?" "Yes." "Mortgage?" "Partly." "Livestock losses?" He looked at her. "How'd you know that?" "You said ranch." Nathan considered that. "Drought took cattle. Then my father died. Hargrove and I have been fighting over water for 2 years. Eleanor turned toward him. "Water rights?" Nathan gave a short laugh. "I thought your first question would be about the kitchen. I can understand a kitchen after I see it. And water? Water determines whether there's a ranch left to have a kitchen in." Nathan looked at her for a long second. Then he told her about Silver Creek. By sunset, Eleanor could see it. The ranch house stood beneath several cottonwoods, weathered but solid. Beyond it lay corrals, a barn, cattle scattered thinly across pasture, and a windmill turning with a long, complaining squeak. The porch sagged on one side. A garden had gone mostly to weeds, but Eleanor saw something else. Good soil near the creek, strong barn timbers, fences repaired where they mattered most, a place neglected by exhaustion, not ruined by worthlessness. A Mexican ranch foreman came from the barn as the wagon approached. Nathan climbed down. "Miguel Alvarez, this is Miss Eleanor Brooks." Miguel removed his hat. "Ma'am." "Mr. Alvarez." Miguel looked at the trunk, then at Nathan, then wisely asked nothing. That night, Eleanor ate beef stew at Nathan's kitchen table beneath a kerosene lamp. Afterward, Nathan showed her the room at the end of the hall. Clean sheets, wash basin, a small window facing the cottonwoods. The latch was broken. Nathan noticed her notice it. "I'll fix that. Tomorrow is sufficient." He nodded. "Good night, Miss Brooks." "Mr. Carter." He reached the doorway. "Where are the bank papers?" Nathan stopped. "It's nearly 10. I spent 4 days crossing the country to marry a man who couldn't manage the courage to reject me in person. I'd prefer not to spend tonight wondering whether I've traded one mistake for another." Nathan stood there quietly. Then he went to get the papers. They sat beneath the kitchen lamp until near midnight. Receipts, loan notices, cattle tallies, tax statements, letters from Gerald Apprentice at the bank, offers from Charles Hargrove. Nathan spoke more slowly as the pile grew. Drought, dead cattle, borrowed money, James Carter's illness, funeral expenses, another dry season, another loan, another letter from Hargrove. Finally, Nathan rubbed both hands over his face. "I kept the cattle alive and let everything else go." Eleanor looked toward the dark window. The windmill squeaked outside. Again, again, again. Then she looked at the man across from her. "But you kept it alive long enough to be saved." Nathan raised his eyes. Something passed between them that neither tried to name. Eleanor returned to the papers. She read Hargrove's first offer, then the second, then the third. She stopped. Nathan noticed. "What?" Eleanor pulled an older map from beneath a tax statement and spread it beside the letters. She read one paragraph again, then another. Her finger moved across the map. The north pasture, the creek, the boundary. Hargrove's property, Silver Creek. Nathan leaned forward. "Miss Brooks?" Eleanor did not answer immediately. For the first time since arriving in Arizona, she forgot about the rejection letter inside her case. She was looking at something far more important. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly, "I don't think Hargrove wants your water." Nathan's chair creaked. "Then what does he want?" Eleanor placed one finger on Silver Creek's north parcel. "Your land." Nathan leaned closer to the map. The lamp flame trembled between them. For nearly 2 years, Charles Hargrove had spoken about water as though water were the whole argument. Access to the creek, irrigation channels, cattle crossings, dry season usage. But his letters told another story. Eleanor arranged them by date. Every proposed settlement required Nathan to surrender some control over the north parcel. The first asked for grazing access. The second proposed a permanent easement. The third offered Nathan relief from the water dispute if he sold 30 acres along the northern boundary. And the latest wanted considerably more. Nathan stared at the papers. "I thought he was trying to make the creek too expensive to fight over." "Perhaps that's what he wanted you to think." Eleanor reached for another stack. Gerald Apprentice's bank letters. She compared the dates. Her expression tightened. "Look." Nathan moved his chair beside hers. Hargrove increased his pressure in April. The bank demanded additional security in May. Hargrove made another offer in August. Apprentice warned Nathan about accelerated repayment 12 days later. Again, not proof, but rhythm. Nathan sat back. You're saying they're working together? I'm saying I don't yet have the right to say that. Nathan looked at her. Eleanor tapped the papers. Suspicion is what you believe. Evidence is what you can make another man believe. That sentence stayed with him. For the next 3 days, Silver Creek became less a ranch house than an excavation. Eleanor opened crates Nathan had not touched since James Carter's death. She sorted tax receipts at the kitchen table, shook dust from old correspondence on the porch, and labeled bundles with string. Nathan worked cattle with Miguel and returned each evening to find another piece of his own history waiting for him. On the 4th afternoon, Eleanor opened a water-stained envelope. Inside was a survey. She unfolded it carefully across the table. James Carter's name appeared near the bottom. As Nathan came inside carrying his gloves. He stopped when he saw it. Where'd you find that? Under receipts for harness repairs. My father kept everything. He did. Eleanor studied the measurements. Then she reached for Hargrove's working map. The difference was small enough that an exhausted rancher might never notice it. Approximately 12 feet. But 12 feet at the critical point changed where Hargrove's claimed boundary met the creek approach. Nathan bent over the table. That's impossible. No. Eleanor put the 2 surveys together. That's dangerous. He looked at her. If father's line is right, Hargrove's claim is wrong. Nathan grabbed his hat. I'll ride into Red Creek. Eleanor caught his sleeve. No. He stopped. It was the first time she had touched him since the depot. Her hand remained there perhaps 1 second too long. She withdrew it. This paper has been sitting beneath dust for 10 years. Until it's verified and entered into the county record, it's only a piece of paper Hargrove can challenge. Nathan's jaw tightened. What do you suggest? Maricopa. Before Nathan could answer, hoofbeats came hard into the yard. Miguel dismounted almost before his horse stopped. Tom Briggs heard Draper talking at the feed yard. Nathan stepped onto the porch. About what? Boundary challenge. Eleanor appeared behind him with the survey still in her hand. Miguel saw her face. When? Soon. Eleanor looked toward the sinking sun. Then we leave before sunrise. Nathan wanted to go. Eleanor refused. Someone had to remain at Silver Creek if Hargrove decided the filing trip was an opportunity rather than a threat. At 4 the next morning, Miguel hitched the wagon beneath a sky crowded with stars. Eleanor came out carrying the survey inside her oilcloth case. Nathan waited beside the gate. He handed her a tin cup of coffee. No sugar, just as she drank it. You remembered. You make a face when it's sweet. I do not. You do. For the first time, Eleanor smiled before she could stop herself. Then Nathan checked the strap securing her case. Bring it home. The survey? His eyes met hers. You. Neither moved for a moment. Then Miguel cleared his throat from the wagon. Eleanor climbed aboard. Maricopa was already hot when they reached the county offices. Sam Hooper sat behind a scarred wooden counter beneath shelves crowded with ledgers. He looked at Eleanor, then Miguel, then Eleanor again. What can I do for you? I need verification of an 1874 land survey and its registration. Hooper held out his hand. Eleanor did not give him the survey immediately. First, she produced Nathan's signed authorization, then the chain of title papers, then the registration number. Hooper's posture changed. Where'd you find all this? In the places nobody bothered looking. He read the documents. Once. Then again. Finally, he carried the old survey into the records room. Eleanor waited. A clock ticked on the wall. Miguel stood by the window. 23 minutes later, Hooper returned with a ledger. James Carter's survey is listed. Eleanor released a breath. Can you certify it? Hooper looked at her. Yes, ma'am. The stamp came down hard. One sharp sound. That was all. But Eleanor would remember it for years. They had been gone less than an hour when Clem Draper rode into Maricopa. By then the record belonged to Silver Creek. The following weeks changed the ranch in quieter ways. Eleanor rebuilt Nathan's ledgers, the kitchen shelves filled with labeled jars. Beans stopped disappearing because nobody remembered how much remained. The neglected garden was cleared. Tom Briggs, who had spent the first week speaking to Eleanor only when necessary, began bringing her receipts without being asked. Miguel stopped watching to see whether she would stay, and Nathan began repairing things, the porch post first, then the loose kitchen shutter, then the windmill. One afternoon, Eleanor realized she had been reading for nearly an hour without hearing its familiar squeak. She stepped outside. Nathan was coming down the windmill ladder with a wrench in his hand. "You fixed it." "Couldn't hear myself think." She knew that wasn't true. Her bedroom window latch was repaired that evening, too. Neither mentioned it. One Sunday, Nathan took her to the North Ridge. A cottonwood stood there alone. Beneath it was a simple grave. James Carter. Nathan removed his hat. "My grandfather settled this land. Mother died in the house. Father spent 40 years keeping it together." Eleanor stood beside him. "That's why you won't sell." Nathan looked across the pasture. "I kept thinking if I lost it, it'd mean Father trusted the wrong man." Eleanor watched the creek flash between the trees below. "Then we save it." Nathan turned. "Why?" She had practical answers. The ranch had value, the cattle could recover, the debt could be managed. Instead, she heard herself say, "Because I have nowhere else to be." The words left a silence behind them. Nathan looked toward the grave, then back at her. "I'm glad I picked up the trunk." Eleanor lowered her eyes. "So am I." 3 weeks after the depot, they rode into Red Creek for supplies. Ada's general store smelled of coffee, leather, flour, and cedar soap. Eleanor was comparing prices when the bell above the door rang. Charles Whitmore Hargrove entered. Clem Draper followed. Eleanor knew him immediately. His photograph had accompanied one of his Philadelphia letters. Hargrove stopped when he saw her. For the first time, the man who had rejected Eleanor Brooks had to look her in the eye. "Miss Brooks." "Mr. Hargrove." He glanced at the ledger beneath her arm. "I hear you've become Carter's bookkeeper." "I keep several things in order." Draper shifted behind him. Hargrove smiled faintly. "You may find Arizona land matters more complicated than Philadelphia paperwork." "That's why I read the paperwork." Ada stopped measuring coffee. Hargrove's smile faded. "You've caused considerable trouble over an obsolete survey." "Have I?" James Carter filed that old thing at the territorial office in Tucson instead of properly handling matters here. Hardly surprising it was forgotten. Eleanor became perfectly still. Hargrove continued speaking. She barely heard him, because he had made a mistake. A small one. The kind men made when they believed they knew more than the person standing across from them. She said nothing. Hargrove eventually tipped his hat and left. The bell sounded behind him. Eleanor remained beside the counter. Ada looked at her. "You all right?" Eleanor turned toward the window. Outside, Hargrove was mounting his horse. Nathan came from the hardware counter. "What happened?" Eleanor waited until they were riding home. Then she told him. Nathan frowned. So? So how did he know where it was originally filed? Nathan's reins went slack. Eleanor continued. "That survey is 10 years old. It was buried in your father's papers. Hargrove knew it went through Tucson." Nathan looked toward the road ahead. He searched for it. "That's what I intend to find out." "The Territorial Records Office?" "Yes. Tucson is 2 days of hard travel. Then I leave before dawn." "I'm coming." "No." Nathan turned sharply. "Hargrove knows we're looking now. which is precisely why Silver Creek cannot be left exposed. He disliked the answer because he knew it was right. After a long silence, he said, "Then don't go alone." At first light, Eli drove Eleanor south. The survey rested in its oilcloth case beneath her feet. The morning passed quietly. By afternoon, the road narrowed between low ridges. Eli glanced behind them once, then again. Eleanor noticed. "What is it?" "Ryder." She resisted turning immediately. "How long?" "Since the last watering stop." Eleanor finally looked. Far behind them, heat shimmered across the road. A lone rider kept his distance. Gray horse, gray hat. Eleanor had seen both at Red Creek Depot. Clem Draper. She faced forward again. Eli started to look back. "Don't." "But Miss Brooks, don't look at him again." Her hand settled over the oilcloth case. Ahead of them stretched the long road toward Tucson. Behind them came the man who worked for Charles Hargrove. Eleanor kept her eyes forward. "Drive." Eli snapped the reins lightly. The wagon rolled south. For the next hour, neither of them looked back. Near sunset, they stopped at a stage station where travelers could buy coffee, beans, and a place on the floor. Eleanor paid for supper, kept the oilcloth case beside her chair, and slept with it beneath her folded coat. By dawn, the gray horse was gone. That worried her more than seeing it. Clem Draper no longer needed to follow. He only needed to get word ahead. They reached Tucson beneath a white afternoon sky. The Territorial Records Office occupied 2 rooms in a brick building where dust gathered along the window ledges and shelves bowed beneath bound volumes. Behind a high counter stood a narrow man with wire spectacles. "Morrison?" Eleanor asked. "That's me." She placed James Carter's survey registration before him. "I need the access ledger for this filing." Morrison read the number. "That's 10 years back." "I know." He disappeared among the shelves. Eleanor waited. 5 minutes. 10. A clock clicked somewhere behind her. Then Morrison returned carrying a thick ledger. He set it down and turned pages carefully. "There." Eleanor leaned forward. The entry was written in faded ink. March 3, 1882, Charles Whitmore Hargrove. She read the name twice. Nearly 2 years before Eleanor arrived in Arizona, Hargrove had examined the very survey whose location he had carelessly mentioned in Ada's store. "Can this be certified?" Morrison looked over his spectacles. "For court? If necessary. Then it'll cost you." Eleanor opened her purse. By the time she left, she had a certified copy wrapped beside James Carter's survey. She did not return directly to Silver Creek. Morrison gave her the address of Arthur Hale, an attorney who handled territorial land disputes. Hale's office was above a saddler's shop. He read everything Eleanor placed before him. He asked questions without wasting words. When she tried to explain her suspicion about Gerald, apprentice, he raised one hand. "You can prove Hargrove knew the true survey existed." "Yes." "You can show he later made offers using a different boundary." "Yes." "You cannot yet prove he and apprentice coordinated the bank pressure." Eleanor hesitated. "No." "Good." She frowned. "Good? You know the difference between what you believe and what you can prove." Hale sat back. "That keeps people from losing cases." He agreed to seek an injunction, preventing Hargrove from altering the disputed boundary until the federal review was completed. It was the first real, legal wall Silver Creek had managed to put between itself and Charles Hargrove. But while Eleanor was in Tucson, Hargrove rode to Silver Creek. Nathan saw him from the barn. Hargrove came alone. That was deliberate. He dismounted near the porch. "Thought we might talk without your new bookkeeper." Nathan kept winding the length of rawhide around his palm. "Talk." Hargrove offered money for the north parcel, more than before. Nathan refused. Hargrove increased it. Nathan refused again. Finally, Hargrove smiled. "Documents are fragile things, Carter. especially when they travel through Red Creek mail. Nathan's hand stopped. Hargrove put on his hat. Think about the offer. Nathan watched him right away. When Eleanor returned 2 evenings later, Nathan was waiting at the ranch gate. He took the oilcloth case from her, then looked at her face. You find it? She nodded. He knew. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor noticed his knuckles whiten around the case. What happened here? Nathan told her. When he reached Hargrove's remark about the mail, Eleanor went still. He's frightened. Nathan looked at her. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. She glanced toward the road. It makes him more dangerous. Nathan seemed about to tell her not to leave Silver Creek again. Instead, he said only, "Be careful." Eleanor looked up. She understood what it cost him to say that instead. I will. Arthur Hale's injunction arrived the following week. Hargrove could not move the disputed line while the territorial and federal questions remained open. 3 days later, his next attack arrived. A complaint. Eleanor read it at the kitchen table. Hargrove alleged that she had represented herself as Nathan Carter's lawful wife in order to obtain access to county records. Nathan stood at the window. This is because of what I said at the depot. Partly. I shouldn't have. It kept me safe that night. And now we answer it. They rode to see Sam Hooper. The county clerk pulled the filing ledger. Eleanor's name appeared exactly where it should. Authorized Representative, Silver Creek Ranch. Nathan Carter's signed authorization was attached. Hooper tapped the page. You never told me you were his wife. No. I'll swear to that. Outside, Eleanor stood beneath the courthouse awning. Nathan came beside her. So it's finished. The complaint probably is. She watched 2 women cross the street and glanced toward them. The whispering isn't. That evening, Nathan found Eleanor on the porch. She had taken down her hair and braided it loosely over one shoulder. A ledger rested closed beside her. Nathan sat at the other end of the bench. Hargrove says you're not my wife. Eleanor turned. He's correct. Nathan rubbed his thumb along the brim of his hat. Could fix that. She stared at him. For perhaps the first time since she'd known him, Nathan Carter looked completely uncertain. Eleanor's voice softened. Don't. His face fell. Don't what? Don't ask me because it solves Hargrove's problem. It isn't his problem I'm thinking about. Then ask me properly. Nathan went silent. A cricket sounded beneath the porch. Finally, he stood. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, he took off his hat. I wanted to ask before that complaint came. She said nothing. I want Silver Creek safe. But if it were safe tonight, I'd still want you here tomorrow. His eyes held hers. I want the woman who argues with me, the woman who found papers my father hid under harness receipts, the woman who made Miguel admit our feed accounts were nonsense. From the barn came Miguel's distant voice. I heard that. Eleanor covered a smile. Nathan did not look away. I want you after this fight is finished. The smile disappeared. Something quieter replaced it. Will you marry me, Eleanor? She let him wait. Not because she doubted him, because this answer deserved room. Yes, Nathan breathed out. Then Eleanor added, After Hargrove. He stared at her. After Hargrove? I will not give that man the satisfaction of calling our marriage another legal maneuver. Nathan laughed. A real laugh. It startled both of them. After Hargrove. 7 weeks after Eleanor stepped from the train, Red Creek held its harvest festival. Lanterns hung between buildings. Wagons lined the road. Fiddle music drifted through dust and cooking smoke. Eleanor saw Hargrove speaking with County Commissioner Fuller, Reverend Harris, and the local magistrate. One by one, respectable witnesses. Nathan noticed too. Stay close. Eleanor looked at him. Beside you. He corrected himself. Beside me. Hargrove approached before the next dance. Mrs. Carter. The title was bait. Eleanor did not take it. Mr. Hargrove. His voice carried just enough. Interesting how quickly a woman can acquire authority when a desperate rancher needs saving. Nearby conversations weakened, then stopped. Hargrove glanced toward Nathan. Though I suppose when Silver Creek is gone, Miss Brooks may discover Arizona less welcoming than she imagined. Eleanor looked at the man she had crossed half a continent to marry. 7 weeks earlier, she had imagined this meeting differently. Now she felt almost nothing. You rejected me at that depot. The festival went still. Hargrove's expression tightened. You arrived here with nothing. No. Eleanor's answer was quiet. I came with my education, my honesty, and my willingness to work. She took one step closer. I've already started from nothing once. Now I know I can do it again. Nathan looked at her and understood. She did not need Silver Creek because she could not survive without it. She was choosing Silver Creek, choosing him. Nathan stepped beside her. Not ahead, beside. Then he removed a folded certified document from his coat. Hargrove. Charles looked at it. Nathan handed the paper to Commissioner Fuller. Tucson Territorial Access Ledger, March 3, 1882. Fuller read. His eyebrows lifted. Nathan continued. You examined Father's true survey before you sent me your first offer using the wrong boundary. Hargrove's face changed. Only slightly, but everyone saw it. No shouting followed, no dramatic applause. Something worse happened to Charles Hargrove. People simply stopped making room for him. He left through the crowd alone. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Fuller approached Nathan and Eleanor. I'd like both of you in my office Monday. Eleanor studied him. Why? Fuller glanced toward the road where Hargrove had disappeared. I've been looking at Gerald Apprentice. The fiddle began again. Nathan extended his hand. Eleanor looked toward Fuller. I'll need to organize the bank correspondence and... Eleanor. She stopped. The music is playing. She looked at his hand, the same hand offered at the depot. This time no one needed rescuing. Eleanor placed her hand in his. They danced. On Monday morning, Eleanor entered Fuller's office carrying enough papers to cover his desk. She never opened the case. Fuller already had a document waiting. He pushed it across the table, whining. Read that, Eleanor did, then read it again. Nathan watched her expression change. What is it? She looked at the signature, Silas Crane, then at the assignment recorded beneath it, Charles Whitmore Hargrove. Eleanor slowly raised her eyes. Hargrove didn't just want your ranch, Nathan. She placed the document between them. He already owned part of your debt. Nathan did not touch it. For 2 years he had believed Charles Hargrove stood on one side of the fight, and his creditors stood on the other. Now there were no sides. Commissioner Fuller leaned back in his chair. Silas Crane held a secondary note against Silver Creek. Hargrove purchased it 18 months ago. Nathan finally picked up the paper. The assignment was plain. Crane's signature, witness, date, Hargrove's name. Why didn't I know? You weren't required to approve the assignment, Fuller said, but what interests me is when it happened. Eleanor already understood. She opened her case. Within minutes, Fuller's desk disappeared beneath documents. Hargrove obstructed Nathan's water access. Gerald Apprentice tightened the bank's terms. Hargrove purchased Crane's note. Then came another offer for the north parcel. The pattern they had been watching was no longer merely a pattern. Nathan stood at their window. So while I was borrowing money to keep cattle alive, he was buying the rope. Eleanor looked at him, and tightening it from both ends. Fuller lowered his eyes. I should have looked sooner. Nathan turned. Why didn't you? Fuller took his time answering. Hargrove gave money to road improvements, bought dinners, helped people after bad seasons. He made his influence look like generosity. His mouth tightened. I treated it as normal. Nathan said nothing. Fuller looked toward Eleanor. James Carter deserved better from this county. Then he reached for a clean sheet of paper. I'm opening an investigation. The ride back to Silver Creek was quiet. Nathan drove. Eleanor held the documents against her lap. At the ranch gate, he stopped the wagon. I thought I was losing because I wasn't good enough to keep what Father left me. Eleanor turned toward him. Nathan stared across the pasture. They never gave you a fair fight. No, but you're still here. He looked at her then. She did not offer comfort he had not asked for. She simply remained beside him. 3 days later, Tom Briggs came into the kitchen carrying a sack of coffee and news from town. James Whitfield's back. Nathan's cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Eleanor knew the name. James Whitfield had once handled Carter family legal matters. He had known James Carter's finances, the water agreements, the loans. Then, shortly after the trouble began, Whitfield left for Santa Fe. Where is he? Eleanor asked. Boarding house behind Ada's store. Miguel entered from the porch. I heard something else. Nathan looked up. Draper met him yesterday. That settled it. Eleanor reached for her oilcloth case. Nathan stood. I'm coming. No. His expression hardened. Eleanor, this isn't Hargrove. You don't know that. Exactly. Whitfield may speak more freely to someone he believes he can dismiss. Nathan disliked it. She could see that. But after a moment he sat down again. Bum, back before dark. I'll try. No. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Nathan corrected himself. Please. Her expression softened. Before dark. The boarding house smelled of boiled cabbage and furniture polish. Whitfield occupied a room upstairs. He was thinner than Eleanor expected. His coat had once been expensive, but the cuffs were worn shiny. He opened the door only halfway. Miss Brooks, so you know who I am. Red Creek knows who you are. Then this should be easier. She entered. Whitfield watched as Eleanor placed documents on the little table beside his wash basin. James Carter's survey, the Tucson access log, Hargrove's offers, apprentices' letters, Silas Crane's transferred note, Fuller's notice of investigation, one at a time. She did not accuse him. That made the room quieter. Whitfield stared at the papers. Finally, he sat down. What do you want? The truth. You think that's simple? No. Eleanor remained standing. But I think you've been carrying it a long time. Whitfield closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. He had introduced Hargrove to Gerald Apprentice. At first, there had been nothing improper about it. Hargrove had money to invest. Apprentice knew ranchers who needed credit. Then the drought came. Silver Creek weakened. Hargrove began interfering with access to the creek. The bank pressure increased. Whitfield noticed and understood. Why didn't you tell James Carter? Eleanor asked. Whitfield looked at the floor. James was already sick. Nathan then. Silence. I was afraid. Eleanor did not rescue him from the admission. Whitfield rubbed both hands together. I told myself I needed proof. Then I told myself it wasn't my business. Then I left. Santa Fe. Yes. And Hargrove? Whitfield looked toward the window. He knew I'd figured it out. What did he say? Whitfield hesitated. Eleanor waited. Outside, wagon wheels passed along the street. Finally, he whispered. He said Nathan Carter wouldn't know what hit him until the land was already gone. Eleanor's face became still. She opened her case, took out paper, then her father's fountain pen. She placed both before Whitfield. Write it down. He looked at her. All of it? All of it. Whitfield began to write. By the time Eleanor left Red Creek, the afternoon light had turned gold. She drove alone. The signed statement lay inside the oilcloth case. She should have felt victorious. Instead, somewhere beyond town, beneath a wide Arizona sky, Eleanor pulled the wagon to the side of the road. She sat without moving. Then the tears came. Not loudly. There was nobody to hear them. She cried for James Carter, who had died believing his ranch was simply failing. For Nathan, who had spent years measuring himself against a defeat arranged before he understood the game. For her own father, whose desk in Philadelphia had taught her that a careful line of ink could sometimes defend a person long after the hand that wrote it was gone. And perhaps she cried for herself. For the woman who had stepped from a train with $14 and refused to cry while strangers watched. There was no audience now. No Hargrove, no Nathan, no reason to remain composed. So Eleanor let herself have those few minutes. Then she wiped her face with a handkerchief, picked up the reins, and drove home. Nathan was waiting on the porch. He saw her eyes. He asked no question about them. He simply took the case while she climbed down. That night, the same kerosene lamp burned on the kitchen table, the one from her first at Silver Creek. Eleanor read Whitfield's statement aloud. When she reached Hargrove's words, Nathan's hands flattened against the table. Nathan Carter won't know what hit him until the land is already gone. The house became very quiet. At last, Eleanor folded the statement. Your father's ranch is safe now. Nathan looked across the lamp at her. Because of you. No, because James kept the survey, because Miguel listened, because Hooper filed it, because Morrison kept the ledger, because Hale knew what to do with it, because Fuller finally followed the money. Because of you. Nathan, because you looked. She stopped. He did not sound grateful. Gratitude could create debts. This was something else. Eleanor glanced at the papers surrounding them, then back at him. Because of both of us. Nathan reached across the table. His hand came to rest over hers. He gave her time to move away. She didn't. Instead, Eleanor turned her palm upward. Their fingers closed. No one spoke. Outside, cattle shifted in the darkness. The repaired windmill turned without a sound. For weeks they had fought through records, roads, offices, accusations, and public whispers. Now nothing needed proving. Nathan's thumb moved once against her hand. Eleanor lowered her eyes, then smiled. Small, private. His hand remained in hers until hoofbeats sounded outside. Miguel called from the porch. Mail from town. Nathan opened the door. Tom Briggs stood there holding a long government envelope. Federal Survey Review. Nathan brought it to the table. For once, Eleanor did not reach for the paper first. This one's yours. Nathan broke the seal. He read the first page, then the second. His eyes stopped. Eleanor waited. Well? Nathan looked at her. The 1874 Carter line is confirmed. She stood. Entirely? He checked the measurement again. Exactly. Eleanor came around the table. Nathan laid James Carter's old survey beside the federal determination. 10 years between them, different paper, different hands, same line, 12 feet. That was all. 12 feet of Arizona ground. Enough to expose years of deception. Nathan folded the federal paper carefully. Neither of them celebrated. They walked outside instead. Night covered Silver Creek. Moonlight touched the cottonwoods along the north pasture. Somewhere beneath them stood James Carter's grave. Nathan stopped near the porch rail. Eleanor stood beside him. From the darkness came the low, steady sound of water moving over stone. Silver Creek. Nathan listened. Then his hand found hers again. This time Eleanor did not need to turn her palm upward. Their fingers already knew how to meet. For several moments, they stood beneath the porch roof, listening to Silver Creek run through the darkness. Nathan had spent 2 years hearing that water as something he might lose. Tonight it sounded different. It sounded like something that had endured. 3 weeks later, Arthur Hale came to Red Creek carrying 2 leather cases and enough certified paper to fill half of Commissioner Fuller's desk. There was no single document that defeated Charles Whitmore Hargrove. That pleased Eleanor more than she expected. James Carter had kept his survey. Sam Hooper had entered it into the county record before Draper could establish Hargrove's competing claim. Morrison had preserved the Tucson Access Ledger proving Hargrove examined that survey in 1882. Fuller had traced Silas Crane's note into Hargrove's hands. James Whitfield had signed his statement. Gerald Apprentice's correspondence supplied the rhythm connecting financial pressure to each new demand against Silver Creek. And the federal survey had confirmed the Carter boundary. 12 feet. Such a small distance on open land. Such a large distance in a courtroom. Gerald Apprentice understood first. His attorney approached Hale before the territorial proceedings could widen. The bank denied participating in any deliberate conspiracy, but Apprentice agreed to restructure Silver Creek's debt under corrected terms and surrender several disputed penalties. Hargrove refused longer. He challenged Whitfield's credibility, questioned the old survey, complained about Fuller's investigation. Then the federal determination arrived in certified form. There was nowhere left to move the line. By October, Hargrove withdrew his boundary claim. His interest in Crane's secondary note was released. Damages for interference with Silver Creek's water access were assessed against him, and the disputed filings remained part of the territorial record. He kept his house, his cattle, most of his money. But he lost the thing he had depended upon most, the certainty that his version of events would become everybody else's. Nathan received the final papers at Silver Creek on a cold morning. He read them once beside the kitchen stove. Then he carried them outside. Eleanor was kneeling beside the garden fence, pulling dead vines before winter. "It's finished," he said. She looked up. "Finished?" "Hale says there's nothing left that threatens the title." Eleanor slowly removed her gloves. Nathan handed her the letter. She read every line. Of course she did. When she finished, she folded it along the existing crease and returned it. "Then Silver Creek doesn't need me anymore." Nathan's expression changed. The sentence had struck exactly where she intended it to. She rose. "I could go to Tucson. Mr. Hale has already offered correspondence work." Nathan nodded once. "Yes. Sam Hooper says the county could use someone who understands land records." "He's right. I have choices." "You do." Eleanor searched his face. Months earlier he might have answered differently. Might have told her what Silver Creek needed. Might have reminded her of everything they had survived. Instead, Nathan stood before her with his hands empty. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Nathan looked toward the north ridge, then back at her. "Whatever you choose. And if I leave?" His jaw tightened. "I'll drive you to the depot myself." That answer hurt. And because it hurt, Eleanor knew it was the right one. Nathan stepped closer. "I meant what I told you before the festival." "So did I. I don't want a bookkeeper because I'm afraid of losing this ranch." He glanced toward the house. "I don't want a wife because I need somebody to save it." His eyes returned to hers. "I want you when there's nothing left for you to save." Eleanor's breath caught. Nathan continued quietly. "If you stay, Eleanor, I want it to be because this is the place you chose." She watched him for a long moment. Then she reached for his hand. I already chose. They married in November. The morning was cold and clear, with a pale sky over Red Creek and frost lingering in the shadows behind Ada's general store. Reverend Harris waited inside the small wooden church. Miguel stood beside Nathan. Tom Briggs had found a coat that fit poorly and polished his boots until they nearly reflected the windows. Eli sat with Ada near the front. Sam Hooper came carrying his good hat in both hands. Commissioner Fuller sat quietly near the aisle. Arthur Hale had ridden in the evening before. Eleanor wore blue. It was the same dress she had once saved for an opportunity in Philadelphia that never became what she hoped. She could have bought another. She chose that one. No father walked her down the aisle. No man gave her away. Eleanor Brooks walked toward Nathan Carter under her own power. Nathan watched her come. He remembered a depot platform, a trunk caught against a warped nail, a folded rejection letter, a woman surrounded by people who would not move, and his own voice saying words he had no right to make true. My wife won't be needing tomorrow's train. Now Eleanor stopped before him. Reverend Harris asked the questions. Nathan answered. Then Eleanor did. No protection required. No legal maneuver. No ranch to rescue. Nothing between them but choice. When Nathan placed the ring on her finger, his hand trembled slightly. Eleanor noticed. She said nothing. Her smile was enough. By spring, Silver Creek had changed. Water moved cleanly through the north pasture. New grass covered ground that had been brown the summer before. The porch stood straight. The windmill turned without its old complaint. Eleanor's garden came back in neat green rows. Nathan increased Miguel's wages. Tom Briggs took responsibility for the South herd and earned every bit of it. Eli began spending evenings at the kitchen table with books Eleanor had ordered through Tucson. He had started talking about studying surveying someday. Arthur Hale wrote twice a month. Some letters concerned Silver Creek. Others contained questions about territorial records he thought Eleanor might notice something in. People began coming to the ranch with deeds, receipts, contracts, and letters they did not understand. Eleanor never pretended to be an attorney. She read. She organized. She showed them what questions to ask. One afternoon, Nathan stopped at Red Creek Depot for a shipment of fencing staples. Harold was there. The station master had grown uncomfortable around Nathan since the previous summer. That day he finally spoke. How is Mrs. Carter? Better than I deserve. Harold almost smiled. Then his face settled. I remember that day. Nathan waited. Her trunk. Harold looked down the tracks. I should have helped her. Yes. There was no cruelty in Nathan's answer. That somehow made Harold look smaller. I don't know why I didn't. Nathan lifted the crate of staples. Maybe that's worth remembering. He drove home before sunset. That evening, Eleanor sat beneath the kitchen lamp balancing the month's accounts. Nathan told her what Harold had said. She stopped writing. For a moment, her eyes moved toward the old trunk standing against the far wall. The brass corners were scratched from years of travel. Inside the oilcloth case lay the rejection note from Charles Hargrove. Eleanor had never burned it. Nathan once asked why. She told him paper could become evidence of things its writer never intended to prove. Tonight, she merely closed the ledger. Do you forgive him? Nathan asked. Eleanor considered the question. I don't think Harold needs my forgiveness as much as he needs to remember why he looked away. Nathan pulled out the chair beside her. The lamp cast warm light across the table. Same room, same table. Same lamp as her first night at Silver Creek. But the papers were ordered now. The cupboards were full. A clean coffee cup rested near Nathan's elbow. Through the open window came the soft turning of the windmill. Nathan looked toward the trunk. I picked up a trunk. Eleanor smiled. You've been saying that for months. Because that's all I did. No. He looked at her. Eleanor rested one hand on the ledger. You gave me room to do the rest. Nathan shook his head. You saved Silver Creek. She looked at him the way she had looked across this same table when the ranch had been drowning beneath debt and dust. We did. Outside, evening settled across the Arizona land. The cottonwood above James Carter's grave moved gently on the north ridge. Below it, water crossed the boundary Hargrove had tried to steal. Nathan's hand settled beside Eleanor's, not over the ledger, not taking her pen, beside hers. Eleanor added the final column. Feed, repairs, wages, cattle receipts. There was money left after every obligation. She checked the figures once more, then drew a clean line beneath them. Nathan looked at the total. Good? Good, he smiled. Eleanor closed the ledger. Once her hands had been wrapped around the handle of a 60-pound trunk that would not move while an entire depot watched. Now those same hands rested on the accounts of a ranch that had survived. Nathan covered neither of them. He simply left his hand beside hers. Eleanor turned her head. Their eyes met. Then she slipped her fingers between his. Beyond the window, Silver Creek kept running. And the home Charles Hargrove believed neither of them deserved belonged to them now, not because Nathan had once called Eleanor his wife before a watching town, and not because Eleanor had saved a ranch when she had nowhere else to go. It belonged to them because the danger had ended. The debt had been untangled. The line had held. The door was open. And when either of them could have walked away, Nathan Carter chose to stand beside Eleanor Brooks. Eleanor chose to stay beside him. Maybe that is what made their love worth remembering. Not the words Nathan spoke on a hot depot platform. Not the ranch they fought to save. Not even the 12 feet of Arizona earth that nearly cost him his father's legacy. It was the choice they made after necessity was gone. Imagine yourself in Eleanor's place, standing beside that trunk while strangers looked away, wondering whether the long journey west had been a terrible mistake. Or imagine being Nathan, watching the land your family built slipping from your hands while grief convinced you that surviving was the same thing as living. Sometimes life leaves us standing at our own kind of depot, carrying more than anyone can see. And sometimes a second chance doesn't arrive with a grand promise. Sometimes it begins with one person reaching down, lifting part of the weight, and leaving us enough dignity to decide what comes next. Nathan gave Eleanor room to stand again. Eleanor reminded Nathan that a wounded home could still become a living one. Perhaps love is strongest when it doesn't rescue us from having choices, but gives us the courage to make them. If their story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Would you have taken Nathan's hand that day? And if you'd like to spend more evenings with stories of frontier love, resilience, mystery, and healing, you're warmly invited to subscribe. There are more journeys waiting just beyond the next ridge.